If you've recently been laid off, I just want to say at the top of this video, I see you, I hear you, and I know how tough this can be. Here are some photos of me in 2018 to 2019 in my first product marketing role, feeling like I'm killing it, like I'm living my best life. And then I got that dreaded meeting that no one wants to get invited to. But there is good news. A layoff does not define you as a person, your identity, and your competency in your role. In fact, it can be the catalyst to something even better. In today's video, I'm going to break down the things that I recommend that you do immediately after hearing the bad news of being laid off, shortly after hearing the bad news, and then your hustle period where you're interviewing and you're applying to jobs. And please stick with me until the end so I can explain some tips that I've used that will help you to future-proof your work experience, aka give you the best shot of not being on that list in the future. Okay, let's get into it. Now, these are the things that I would recommend you do immediately after hearing the bad news. And number one is to ask for a layoff letter. Now, the company that let me go back in 2019, they sent me an email pretty promptly letting me know that it had nothing to do with my individual performance, that it was a restructuring of our entire department. Now, if your company does not do that immediately, I highly recommend that you request a layoff letter. Now, sometimes despite your best efforts, when you request it, you might not get it from your former company, and that's okay. In my personal experience, I've never had to leverage anything in writing explaining how I was laid off or why I was laid off, but it is nice to have for your job hunt to kind of show proof and evidence. It had nothing to do with you as an employee and your performance. It was something out of your control, like a restructuring. Next, I'd recommend that you review your severance package or your severance options. So look through your severance package, look through your unused PTO, if there's any kind of job placement assistance, benefits, extensions, etc. If anything looks unclear or seems unclear in the documentation, don't hesitate to reach out to your HR business partner that is coordinating your offboarding, or you can consult with an employment attorney if you have the means to do so. Now, in my experience, I've never really had to request a severance. I've been very privileged and lucky that way, but companies are different. And so if you haven't gotten any information about a severance package, I highly request that you negotiate it or request it in general. In my experience, most of the time, if you're being laid off and it's especially for something that is outside of your control, then you should be entitled to a severance package. Now, of course, you should file for unemployment benefits as soon as you possibly can. Now, this is something that I didn't do immediately after hearing about my layoff back in 2019, but I highly recommend that you do better than me and you file your unemployment benefits as soon as you can. They're there for situations like this. Now, it's going to depend on where you live. I recommend you check out your local guidelines and apply for assistance. And last, on the more financial and logistical kind of checklist item, immediately after you hear the bad news of a layoff, I highly recommend that you evaluate and look at your health benefits. If your employer isn't covering extended benefits, then I would explore COBRA or other marketplace plans. And pro tip, after I got laid off, I made sure to refill all my prescription medications as soon as I can to the nth amount that I could, because who wants to be going into a job market without antidepressants? And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the emotional weight of hearing this kind of news. So I know that it can seem tempting to want to jump right into applying to jobs and kind of getting your feet back under you after hearing about a layoff. But I highly recommend that you take at least a few days. I'd recommend actually a week to really process how you feel, really grieve, because it is a loss in some way, the loss of your former job, and just allow yourself to really emotionally process. Once you've had time to process how you feel and kind of grieve your previous employment, I would then shift your focus to reflection. So I would start asking myself questions like, what did I really enjoy in my previous role? What do I feel like wasn't such a great fit for my skill set? And this will be your chance to really reassess if this is the kind of roles that you want to keep applying to and you want to develop a career in. Now, this next list of things that I'd recommend to do after a layoff comes not immediately after you hear the news, but shortly after, and that is getting really real with your finances. So take a hard look at your budget roughly 1 week after that initial news, and this is what I recommend you do following that. First, assess your savings. So how many months of expenses can you realistically use from your savings? Which brings me to my next point, which is to cut back on non-essentials. So cancel any subscriptions or memberships. Every little bit helps, but I will recommend that in 2019, I'm a big movie person and a big show person, and I don't know what I would have done if I canceled all of my subscriptions to like Netflix and Hulu. And I just want to caution you, I know everybody's going to tell you something differently, but if that's kind of a comfort during your really hard period of searching for a new job after a layoff, don't cancel it. I know I just said to cancel any unnecessary subscriptions, but I don't know what I would have done if I couldn't have watched an episode of Schitt's Creek after a really tough interview. So just be kind to yourself as well. You don't need to cut off literally everything, but I do recommend if there's something that you're not using that you're getting charged every month, Marie Kondo it. If it's not bringing you joy, just cancel it. And finally, I recommend that you explore some other alternative income streams. So if you're interested in freelancing, maybe you could do copywriting, or maybe you can take on like consulting work or gig related work. There are many ways to make money while you're actually actively interviewing for the role that you want. And I'm gonna be real here. I strongly recommend that you try to let go of your ego in this time. So I know that maybe you really want a product marketing role, or maybe you really want, a head of sales role or whatever it is, but you're taking on odd jobs to make money while you interview. That doesn't mean that you're not qualified for that job or that you're any less than because you're taking on these kind of small like income streams while you're interviewing. So don't feel like you're above doing DoorDash or doing TaskRabbit or maybe pet sitting on Rover or walking dogs. Every little bit helps, and you'd be surprised that having these kinds of alternative income streams really helps you to have a sense of structure. And believe it or not, there's been a lot of times where I've started to take on little side projects or side hustles while I'm interviewing, and then all of a sudden a great opportunity comes into my lap and really starts to move forward. So you don't know unless you really try to get out of your head about the fact that these are jobs that you don't want long term. Just do what you can to bring in that extra money and also give you a sense of structure during this time. All right, my next list of recommendations that I recommend that you do is during your hustle phase. So this is when you have processed your feelings, when you have taken care of the basics in terms of your finances and your budget, and now you're ready to update your LinkedIn profile and your resume and get back out there. I recommend that you first take a long look at what you've done and your accomplishments in your last role, then start peppering in some common phrases or common words that most of the job descriptions out there they're looking for in a candidate. You start putting that into your LinkedIn profile so it will start coming up. And lastly, update your LinkedIn headline to say something along the lines of experienced product marketer looking for your next opportunity, or something like that to give recruiters a heads up that you are looking for your next opportunity. Once you've gone through and you've kind of thought about all the accomplishments that you had at your last role, I highly recommend that you sit down and start to write out the unique story of your work experience. So I talked about this in a previous video in detail, so if you haven't seen that video, please go ahead and check it out. But a big part of product marketing interviews is to really showcase your storytelling skills. And a great way to do that is to answer the question of walk me through your resume with a very impactful structure of telling your story and your unique work experience and how you are a great fit for that specific role. So to learn, again, that structure of how to really build out your work experience into a cohesive story, check out that other video on my channel to learn more and do that for your own work experience. And if you have some downtime between your interviews and maybe your side hustle that you're doing to bring in some extra income, I highly recommend that you take this time to invest in yourself. So that can mean anything from online courses to maybe watching videos like this to beef up your skills and your knowledge, and certifications as well. Now, back in 2019, I knew that I didn't really have a lot of experience or a lot of knowledge in the demand generation systems that they use. So demand gen marketers are the kind of quintessential marketers that focus on ads, creating leads for sales. And I didn't really understand a lot about Google Analytics, for example, which is a tool that many demand gen marketers use. And so I took some certifications for Google Analytics back in 2019 just to have a better understanding of how that system works and to help me to understand and empathize with the demand gen marketers on my future product launches. So I would be able to kind of speak their language a little bit more, and I thought that was a good investment of my time to just learn a little bit more about the different functional teams of a product launch. And once you've updated your resume, your LinkedIn, you're feeling good about your own unique story, you've written it down, and you can explain how your work experience kind of builds off one another, I highly recommend that you work with a PMM specialized coach, or you practice your interview questions with a PMM leader. And you can do this with a friend, you can do it with your partner, or maybe with a family member, but I highly recommend that you work with someone in product marketing, a hiring manager, or someone who is experienced in interviewing product marketing candidates. And the reason why I say that is I talk a lot about this on my channel, but product marketing interviews are notoriously difficult. And that's because they're judging you on the content of what you're saying, but also how you're saying it. They're judging you on your thought process of how you came up with the answer that you came up with. And so I think it's really, really beneficial, and it can help you get that next PMM role much faster by working with a PMM leader or a PMM coach who is going to know what the hiring manager is looking for in your interview answers. And next section is so important. I am so happy you're here. If you made it this far, thank you so much. We really want to make sure that we can future-proof your work experience. And what I mean by that is we don't want you to end up on the layoff list again, right? Now, there's things outside of our control, such as company restructuring, that have nothing to do with your performance. But in my experience, doing the following things while I'm currently employed has really helped me to avoid layoffs up to this point. So once you've landed your next PMM role, please, please, please do not rest on your laurels. Tech layoffs especially can happen so frequently. I worked for one company that it happened almost every single quarter. And so you really want to make sure that while you're employed, you're doing the most that you can to avoid that next layoff round. Here's a list of things that you can do while you're currently employed to avoid that layoff. And number one is I'm always looking at job descriptions or different roles out there, even if I'm happily employed. And the reason why is because I want to know what companies are currently hiring for. What experience are they currently looking for? What do they really want in stellar candidates? And so I'll just scroll through different job descriptions out there just to see what's in demand. And at my current company, if I find an opportunity where I can fill a hole in my resume or experience I don't currently have, I'm going to pitch it. So for example, I noticed that a lot of companies are looking for product-led growth experience. They want candidates who know how to do a product-led growth strategy. And I didn't have a lot of experience in that area. So I found an opportunity at my current company to use a product-led growth strategy to get customers to use a brand new feature. And so I pitched that to my current company and my leadership, and I was able to get pretty good results from that. And so you're always looking for ways to build up your resume and fill in those holes or that in-demand experience that you may not have been exposed to yet to keep you competitive as you continue to grow your career. Next, when I'm working on a big project like a product launch, I update my resume as I get results. So when I get results, I go and update my resume. I don't wait until I'm in the job market or actively hunting for a job, because it can be so overwhelming to have to go through and hope that you wrote down success metrics, hope that you wrote down the results of that product launch or feedback that you got. It just makes it so much easier just to sit down right after you've gotten the results from your product launch while you're employed and just update your resume. So if that time comes, when you're looking for your next opportunity, you have a resume that's already basically built out with the accomplishments that are gonna put your best foot forward. Next is a really big one, and I've talked to other hiring managers and PMM leaders about this, and they all seem to agree, is learn from your mistakes and vocalize your wins. Now, I know it can be really awkward sometimes to explain to people or leadership like positive results and try to say that you're this great person or this great product manager, but it's really not about that. There's a way that you can do it where you acknowledge the team, where you acknowledge the collective effort on driving really great results of a product launch. So you need to really let other teams know about the results of a product launch, let them know how their contribution led to the results of the product launch, and let your executive team know what the results were of your collective efforts. Because guess who's never on the list for a layoff? Is people that vocalize their wins and their results. Now, let's say that you did a product launch and it didn't go as well as you would have hoped. I would recommend that you still vocalize the results. And the reason why I say this is because I've done a product launch in my past that didn't go very well. It actually made $0. And I was reporting to the COO at the time. So I had to write up a summary of the results. And what I did was I did a retrospective. So I had this huge meeting with all these different teams that were involved in the launch. And I just asked them for their honest honest feedback. You know, what could we have done better? What did we do well? And from there, we came up with some ideas of how we could have a better launch process and get better results the next time. And what that ultimately led to was a really successful product launch because we had taken the time to learn from our mistakes and to really grow and be creative and think of new ways to drive success. And newsflash, I wasn't fired for having a launch that completely failed, but my COO actually told me he really appreciated that I was honest, that I took accountability, and I did talk about the results even if they weren't great. And he also appreciated that I was proactive in finding ways that we could improve. So again, just remember that a layoff does not define you. It can actually be a great period of reflection and growth, and even lead to really incredible pivoting in your career. And there you have it. I hope you found this video helpful in giving you a guide of what to do after a layoff and how you can future-proof your work experience to hopefully avoid a layoff in the future. And if you're open to it, please find the link to my Calendly in the description of this video, as well as the pinned comment, where we can have a quick 30-minute call just for me to understand your product marketing interview experience. What challenges have you come up against? What could you use help in? Now, this is not a sales call. It's not a free coaching call. It's more research-based for me to understand how I may potentially help you in the future. Alrighty, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.